Madison and Melissa, it is so great to have you on Called and Caffeinated. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely.
I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. What are you guys drinking?
Remember, I've been doing iced coffee like all summer in Southern California. So I've made some iced coffee on my mom's cool coffee machine. Yeah. That's what I did.
What kind of machine does she have?
Oh my God. Do you know what that brand is? It's a Ninja brand. It's really cool. There's an over ice brew option. So I think I've pretty much been doing it every day since I got back, like in March or April.
That's incredible, because that's always the problem for me with making my own iced coffee is like I want it now. I don't want to wait for it, refrigerate it.
Yeah, I know. Awesome. Or have it like watered down or whatever. But this is great. Just some like milk and agave to sweeten, and it's great. Yeah,
I love it. So you're in SoCal, so it's like 70 degrees. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Nice, amazing,
nice fall day.
Oh, well, aren't you lucky?
It's good. It's good.
We're grateful. Actually, it's 70 here today in Southern Virginia. No, Northern Virginia. Where am I? Yeah.
I love it.
Melissa, are you drinking anything?
Yeah, I am. I have, so our parents' house has multiple coffee options, but my husband is passionate about espresso. So he made me a latte for the occasion. So I've got a nice little latte here, which is fun. So it's usually like our Saturday treat or something, but he made me a latte my mom has a cool little espresso machine. So
where it foams the milk and everything.
Yeah.
I love those. We had one until it broke, and I think that's going to be my Christmas present. Another espresso machine. Yeah. Perfect. Ladies, awesome. So what calls have you received from God in your life so far, and what has receiving those calls looked and felt like for you?
Yeah. Are we just going to keep deferring to the other? Yeah, whichever. Oh my gosh. I guess calls of, I think of calls as like where I've been led as far as like where to live, as well as schooling and also artistry and vocation. So, I think I've been called into performing, which is what we do. It's my career at this point, musical theater. Being called to that. I'm a sister as well. Like, I know that's just like how, I have no choice in that matter, but I'm a middle sister.
But you love it.
I'm a younger sister and I'm an older sister. So I've been called to that.
Nice.
Also called to live in New York, for the past 5.5 years, currently in quarantine. I'm just starting to accept the fact that I might be being called to live here, which is in California, and trying to figure out what that means for me. Not permanently, or, I still have my apartment in New York, but not sure where I'm being called currently. Or just trying to be in the present moment of like, just called to be here today.
I know you're not alone in that. There's so many people who are in that difficult situation in the performing arts. It's really tricky. Yeah.
It's a big question mark for a lot of people in the country right now. So, trying to live in that question mark, as it were. And then, and they just called me to be a daughter of God, I would say. Our faith has been, taught to us by our parents and encouraged and practiced in our family. And, so that's awesome. And called to a single life right now. And then wherever God calls me from there.
Awesome. Yeah. How about you, Melissa?
Yeah. And so, a lot like Madison, kind of discerning through childhood and then the high school years of this call to being an artist, just having this passion and love for theater. And so that always being, I started doing theater when I was 8 and was, bit by the bug, as they say, and just kind of never looked back as far as what I wanted to pursue. It was just such a love. And I remember, so I think I was probably about 20, and I had always planned to move to New York City, and had this summer where I was at home in California and kind of preparing to figure out plans to move to New York City, and kind of felt this, at the time I had come to know this really wonderful community at like a Protestant non-denominational church in our area, and was at this like evening of prayer, and they did this kind of prayerful discerning exercise of like surrender. So they had like this bonfire and planks of wood, and they had you like kind of prayerfully discern, what is God calling you to like surrender in your life right now? What are you possibly clinging to too tightly that's His? And so I remember like having this like burning in my heart, like I have to write down musical theater. And I was like, it's so hard to surrender that. And obviously that's why I needed to.
Yes.
So it's kind of this beautiful moment of like, okay, God, I get you're calling me to it. And of course, it's a good thing. Our passions are good things, but always placing them before God and asking him to be the one who's really guiding us into them. So, so I remember writing
the wood bird.
Yeah. Oh my God. I remember writing like musical theater and like putting it in the bonfire. Okay.
And then 3 years later, she was on Broadway. So I guess
so it worked out.
That's such a blessing. No, such a blessing. But there was something beautiful. No, you're right. I mean, what was beautiful about it was just like, okay, it is hard, you know, as God is calling us, like you said, the calls in your life, to always kind of like offer them back to him. And when you are like walking in his journey for you, there's just such a beautiful, like he opens these doors. And so after that, I did go out to New York City and got some callbacks for things. I booked another job and just kind of felt like, okay, God, like we're doing this. Like he's like, go my little bird, fly free in New York City. Anyway, so I do kind of remember that as like a specific moment. And then more recently in my life, that was several years ago now, and a decade ago. And now it's just been beautiful to continually discern my call. And of course, being an artist is still very central to it. But the most beautiful call, my life, which is being called to marriage, with my husband, Stephen, and then being called to have children. We have one child and one in the womb. So it's just beautiful to then discern together. He's an artist as well. And so, we actually just were listening to our homily from our wedding. We just celebrated our second, anniversary. And so we decided we should listen to it every year to remind ourselves. What like Father John Paul said.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, it was my husband's idea. He's like, I think we should listen to it. I was like, that's great.
Love it.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
And he talked so heavily in our homily about mission and your mission, entering into your vocation of marriage, what that looks like as a married couple, and how, you know, he said this is not something that anyone can tell you, but you discover with God as you go. And so we're in a constant, of course, like discerning of our mission as artists, what that looks like in our marriage. Of course, the calls that all married couples have, which is to lead each other to heaven. And then, of course, be stewards and parents of the children that God blesses you with. So it's a beautiful, exciting journey. There have been lots of turns and shifts along the way. We live in California now, so that was kind of an unexpected. We moved back to California this year. So like Madison said, where are you called to, you know, right in this moment, this day? And God always has surprises up his sleeve. So that's fun.
Oh my gosh, it's so true. Melissa, I love that you surrendered your career to God at age 20, because I look back now, and if there's one thing that I could do differently about my 20s, it would be to surrender my career to God. Because I always say this in my talk when I give talks about discerning God's will. I always say, like, my prayer life was basically like, okay, God, I want to do this thing. And if you don't want me to do it, just send a lightning bolt. Otherwise, I really want this. So.
I know. That's the passion of your heart. I totally understand.
Right? Like, it's a natural thing to hold on to that and a natural thing to cling on to that. But it reminds me of, you know, they always say, it's a bit of a like overused thing, but they always say, like, if you love someone, let them go.
Let them go.
And to love is to let go. And it's true. Like, the things that you most want in your life are exactly the things, like you said, that you need to surrender to God. And so finally, when I did start surrendering my artistry to him, it was like, I would go in the chapel and I would do so many ugly cries, because this priest gave me this prayer of surrender, and it was like, it changed my life. I mean, it changes it handed over every part of your life to God. Actually, I just wrote a surrender prayer for artists.
Oh, that's beautiful.
I'd love to pray.
I will send it to you guys.
Taking a big.
I'd love to pray.
You'd love to pray. Air quotes.
It's not easy. It's not easy.
And at every season, you have to surrender everything new. Like, you know, you surrender every child that you have, and you surrender every, your spouse and every relationship. And it's like ongoing. But like, what's really cool is the return on that is so huge. And what a cool thing. Like, I think, when I knew you, when you were doing Les Mis on Broadway, and when we met in New York, there was such a sense of peace about you and such a sense of mission as well. And I think, that can only come when there is surrender, because you've surrendered it to God and you've said, if you want me to have this, I will, I'll accept whatever your will is. And then when he does give it back to you, you can just move forward with such confidence. It's the way to go. Yeah. That's I love so that. Oh my gosh. I love that. So I actually, didn't send this question to you in advance, Melissa, but this is a big question from a lot of ladies. I think this is more for Melissa than Madison, although I'd love to hear both your thoughts on it. A lot of ladies I know will talk about the struggle of being an artist full time, as well as then transitioning to motherhood. And there's a fear, because everyone will tell you, maybe not everyone, but a lot of people will tell you that you can't do theater professionally, or like your life has to change. You have to give up your passion in order to be a mother. What is that journey like for you? And how do you remain fulfilled as an artist and a mom?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really valid to be afraid of that. But I think what the kind of foundational disposition has to be is a trust in God, and knowing that he knows you better than you know yourself, and he will give you what will fulfill you most. And so right now in my life, I am in a period, actually since I got engaged and married and had my daughter, I haven't been on a stage performing. I have been, it's different than performing, but I've been doing music ministry with my husband. So kind of in this time where I was actually very welcoming of that break from it at that point in my life, because I had been doing a long running show for quite a while and had reached like 3 years with my Les Mis journey, which was such a beautiful journey. And it felt very much like, okay, like, passing to the torch to the people who will go into that show and will keep the story alive. And I felt like my time with it had very much come to an end. And there was a piece about that and an excitement about moving into kind of this next chapter of my life where I was then. And what was beautiful about that is I didn't know what it was going to look like. I didn't know, when will I be on a stage next? When will I get to sing in front of people next? All these things that I do love to do. I love telling a story through music. And that's what's awesome about God. It's like he gave me, in my husband, a man who, through our relationship, we were able to do music, and I was stepping into music ministry, which was something I had actually never done before. And the process for me and that, like how that grew me in my faith in a different way than at that point I had in theater specifically, was a gift that I needed at that time. It was just something that God blessed me with that I didn't see coming. And so even now I would say it is, I think, a matter of like trying to balance and figure out what it looks like. And my daughter, just a little over a year old, of course, just I want to be with her, spend time with her. And it is hard to find times to kind of like, it can be difficult. You do kind of have to work towards like a balance. And I don't know that I'm quite in this place where I'm like, oh yeah, I like have all these creative things, but I'm not feeling a lack at the same time either. So I think kind of in those moments, like if God wants to kind of bring something to my heart and like, hey, Melissa, I kind of want you to do this. He can, and he does. And actually, like, recently, it was for the Be Not Afraid conference, I like wrote a song, and that was not something I really like set out to do, but all of a sudden just in this moment, it was like, I was in the shower because that's like my prayer thinking time. And God was like, here's a song. And I was like, oh, okay. And then like that just kind of like happened, and it happened really fast. But I think why it happened fast is because God's like, I know you're a mom and you're giving, like, you don't have all this time. And so I'm going to give this to you fast. Like I want you to do this. And it was a really beautiful experience. And then just recently yet again, I mean, I think kind of carving out these spaces of time, for your own prayer life, obviously first, but a lot of times with that, I think the creativity can come in those times of prayer. And it seems like so far, I think there's a lot more for me to learn about this, but so far I feel like God's just kind of giving me little, like, I'm going to give you this little pocketed time, and I'm going to kind of just, I don't know, have this creative session with you. It's like me and God, like, okay, what are we doing now creatively? I love it. So it's something I'm still very actively learning, but I guess what I would tell people in that fear is just to surrender it, like we're gonna, surrender, and trust that God does know you well. And I have been so beautifully blessed by stepping into the commitment of marriage, the covenant of marriage, by having my daughter and now being pregnant again. And all of that is only going to enrich my creativity because you speak from your experience. So what I will be able to create from there is going to come from these experiences that I have that God has designed me for. Like, these are things that he is like, these are gifts I've given you, Melissa, specifically. Yeah. So just trusting that, like, he knows, like, each of us as a daughter and son so well, that he will only guide us into what is best for us. And as artists, he will always kind of provide those opportunities.
I love that. You did such a beautiful job with the Take Courage song for the Be Not Afraid conference. Oh my gosh.
I feel like I could take credit for it because I really feel like the Holy Spirit was just like, then do this, then do. I was like, okay, I don't know.
Yeah, that's how I feel about the entire Be Not Afraid conference experience. People are like, how did you do that? I'm like, I don't think I did. Like, I really don't think that I did. Like,
Holy Spirit was like,
God was like, go do this, now do this. And I'm like,
but you have that. I mean, you just had that, like, amazing docility to him and like, okay, yes,
surrender.
Yeah. And you're like, all right, we're doing it. So
yeah, that conference had such beautiful wings and such that is a memory that will stay with me forever. And when I heard that song that you wrote, I remember just shedding tears of joy. And now that we're in this crazy and divisive and insane election season, I'm singing that song again because it is it's scary to think about where our country's potentially going and so forth. So it's a song that I'm going to take with me for my whole life. I'll link to it in the show notes because I feel like it's no less relevant now than it was back in March. Possibly even more because the craziness has not subsided.
Right. I mean, there's fear, there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of stress, there's a lot of confusion. And I just think God was like, my child, like, I'm here, so
yes,
I'm glad to hear that you felt that, and I hope people feel that.
So good. And when I was hearing you speak, I also felt like there was a part of me that remembered, like, when I was considering leaving New York and when I found out I was pregnant and when I was, considering marriage, there was a part of me that was like, oh, so you're going to give up on your dreams. And that's not an authentic voice. That's not the voice of God.
No,
that's the voice of the evil one.
It is.
The devil backs you into a corner and makes you think that your life has to look this one specific way or else it's not good enough.
Yeah.
The same thing with like making it on Broadway. There was a time in my life where it was like, if you don't get on Broadway, you are not good enough and you have failed and you're just not good enough as a person. And like, what a pressure to put on yourself.
Absolutely. And just, those are just lies. Those are flat out lies. But it's it's easy to have someone else say it and go, that's a lie. Like, don't believe that for a second. Like, but it's a whole nother thing when it's that voice in our head. That's so hard.
Absolutely. Especially, and I see this with a lot of people because I have a lot of people who are studying musical theater who would love to be doing what you guys have done and what I did in New York. And a lot of them have this kind of mentality, consciously or subconsciously, that like, if they're putting all this money, they're putting all this time and this effort into this career, they're moving their entire lives and this is their passion and they need to prove themselves. And it's definitely, it's just such pressure to put on yourself, because even you guys can attest to this, as an artist in New York City, like, I went 6 months without booking a show when I first moved there. I booked my first audition ever.
I mean, and that's amazing. And like, that 6 months, that's great.
Like, 6 months, right? Actually, 6 months. Not that long.
I mean, it feels like forever, but it's not. Like,
right. So even as an artist in New York City, you're not constantly creating. And this is where I think the lie is, like, when I'm in New York and I give my full attention and time to this career, I can be a creative. And then when I become a mother, I can't be a creative anymore. And the two things are not, they are congruent. They are not.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. And like you said, Melissa, too, like, I totally resonate with that. That productivity where you have shorter spaces of time, so you do more. Like, it's amazing.
Here we go.
And you have more to, I feel like I have more to say because of my children. It's so different for everybody. Some people,
exactly.
Like I do miss having like days and days where I didn't have that much to do other than my creative life. And I could just go take a dance class. Like I do miss that.
Sure. Yeah.
But at the same time, when I sit down and I have an hour and a half to crank out a blog post, a talk, a whatever, I do it because I know that that's the amount of time that I have. And I do feel like overall the quality of my work is better because it's informed by my children. So seasons of life, like you go up and down, it's like there's times when you're not operating at your full creative capacity, but there are times where you're operating at like 175% of what you thought was possible.
Yeah. Not just in observation. I know I'm not in that experience, but you are, especially as the mother, partaking in the creation of life at the fundamental creation, which it's not like you're really like in there, like you're not a part of it in this, in a sense that you're aware of. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but you're partaking in the most fundamental way.
God is creating you, and your body is a part of that creation that your husband can't, frankly, partake in the same way. Right. But I don't know if that's something to meditate on, but
that's definitely something to meditate on. Because I was gonna say too, because as a mother, there are times that you can feel like, oh, but what am I doing right now? It's like, oh, what you're doing is you're there's a child in your womb that's being created, or there's a child that you're nourishing, and it's very easy for mothers to fall into that, those ways of thinking. And it's helpful to have outside people remind you of that. And we aren't defined by doing, we're defined by being, and just by being God's daughter. We forget that all the time, especially in American culture, but that's the truth.
And I know, like Melissa said, she's not really necessarily performing right now, but what I will say is 3 months ago, she's like, so my daughter and I are going to do Sound of Music sometime. I'm excited for when we can do
okay, my children is old enough. Maybe someone will cast us in Sound of Music.
So she's still having the imagination of
if Rio wants to. If she doesn't want to, it won't make
Yes. Oh, totally. And you can inspire your children when your children see that you have a passion and you can partake in that together. Yeah. The concept that God is limitless is real. That there are no limits that you can put on God. If God wants you to perform with your daughter, it's going to happen. And maybe, I don't know, maybe you're going to tour the US like a mother-daughter show. Who knows?
You never know what God can do. You never know.
Exactly. Yeah. It's so
there's
true.
One thing I wanted to touch on, because I think this is really important, the idea of the pressure to prove yourself. I think that's a huge hurdle, and something that all of us, I would probably in any career, people fall into this. And in theater, like you said, you invest so much, you study so much, you do all these things. When I was 17 and did a show, and we were doing, and this was just a regional show. It was a very secular group of people. And one of the women was she was a fellow Christian. She was like, we're going to do a prayer circle if anyone wants to join. I was like, you're awesome. And so we did a prayer circle. Nice. And she said, these words have never left me. Mm-hmm. She said, Lord, we know we have nothing to prove and everything to share. Nothing to prove and everything to share. And I was like, that's it. That's the mindset of an artist, that when you switch, because it's so easy to want to prove. And when you start to allow that shift and know, my purpose is to share. That's why I'm doing this. And the relief that comes from that, and the freedom that then you can perform or create from.
Absolutely.
It's just totally different. So I know that is such a struggle for all of us. And so I just wanted to share those words, because
that is so true. Every audition that I booked in New York was because I walked into the room with that mentality living in my heart that I have something to share, not something to prove. And the ones where you walk in and you feel like you have something to prove, they can smell it.
Yeah.
Everybody can sense that, and you're not really free to actually live in the moment. Oh my gosh, it's so true. Before we go any further, I want to ask you, what roles did you play on Broadway? And, what roles and what shows?
So I made my Broadway debut in Cats, the 2016 revival. It was such a dream come true. And it's such a blessing. It's weird that, I mean, it was like 4 years ago, which in a way it feels like a lifetime ago, and also feels like not that long ago at all. It's so bizarre. Wow. But I was in the original cast. I was a swing, and I understudied 4 roles. And then I also was there's like a backstage vocal booth for the show to add like vocal cushion. So I was in that vocal booth.
Can you tell us nothing she can't do?
Yeah, go.
Yes. So swing is the hardest job in a show. Can you tell the people who don't know what a swing is, what a swing is?
Right, of course. So a swing is essentially an offstage cast member who has to know multiple roles. Usually it's a chorus, knowing chorus roles. And in the event that anyone in the ensemble gets sick, injured, has to leave for a personal reason, that way the show can still go on. The swing goes into that position, fulfilling the cast. So I've now done it twice. Did it as well on the Cats tour recently. That was just 2 roles, so that was so much easier. But it's definitely, and for context, most shows have about, let's say, 6, maybe like 4 to 8 swings, like half male, half female. Cats, when we opened, had 10. And as the show progressed, we had 13 swings total. So there was just so much coverage that was needed, myself included. So many people got injured. It's
mid-show, happens mid-show, like someone gets injured. They have to do their makeup and get in full cat.
Yeah. So
it's probably one of the most dance-heavy shows ever performed, right? Yeah. If not the most.
Yeah. It's like in like the chorus line realm, like as far as like you never leave the stage. You really have to know your stuff. But it was definitely, I mean, as a performer, in my mind, it's like the most challenging performing job I've ever had, because especially talking about surrender, you would think I'd be better at it in my real life still after the fact. But
always evergreen.
For myself, who I want to know what I'm doing and I want to be in control of a situation. As a swing, it's like you just have to trust yourself. You have to study. You have to do your homework. But if things don't go as planned, you just have to let it go. And when I say that, I know that can be nefarious. What I mean is like, if I, in my head, was rehearsing for this role earlier in the afternoon, because also, just so people know, when Broadway shows are currently running, they're still rehearsing throughout the day. That's something I don't think I really understood.
Yeah.
So as a show, so any show you go and see on Broadway right now, Wicked, they're having the ensemble and swings for the most part are coming in 3 to 4 times a week to rehearse in the afternoon, or I guess 2 to 4 times a week, and then performing that night. So for me, I would be, let's say I'm rehearsing the role of Cassandra in the afternoon, and then we have a dinner break, and on the dinner break, I get a text from management that says you're on for Demeter, which is a different role. So then I'm switching going to a different, finally having it in my brain, reviewing notes if I need to, but so then if in the performance I start doing something that was something Cassandra did, as long as I don't like severely hurt someone, just like let it go. Like, you know what? That's funny. My brain is human, and I just forgot for a second, and like,
you're not a machine.
Just training for something else. So it makes it really quite fun. There's a part of swinging that I know some people it doesn't work with every person's brain, but there's a part of it that's really. Yeah. And it can be kind of exciting because part of performing is like, yes, you are doing the same thing 8 times a week. And with being a swing, you're like, I don't know what's going to happen today. Part of that's exciting, part of it's stressful, but it's, I guess you take with it.
That's so interesting. And just so people know what it's like in my show, and I have no doubt in your show too, there are markings on the stage where there is literally like, you have to know if you're at the, they mark it by feet. So it's like 2 feet left to center, 2 feet right of center, 10, 12, whatever. You have to know exactly where you are on that grid of the stage at every moment, at every point throughout the entire show, because that's where the lights are. And that's exactly where it's not just that they have a spotlight that just follows you wherever you feel like you want to go, as long as you get the words right. It is so highly choreographed. And it is, like every moment of the show, I was watching Hamilton on Disney Plus the other day, and I was like, I could see, I was like, this, I forgot how precise you have to be. And you get constant feedback. You get constant notes coming in from the dance captain who's like, hey, be, half a foot to your left on this particular spot. Like it is for this one lyric, for this one moment. And that is the work and that is the art that goes into it. It is so detailed.
And just a little tidbit, because I think it's kind of funny. Cats is one of the only shows I've done. It does not have a number line.
Really?
In the design of the show, the stage, it's meant to look like pieces of newspaper and trash all like laying on top of each other. It's supposed to be a junkyard. So the deck itself is painted with all these different patterns. So for tracking, which is like essentially tracking where like the placement of your character, we would come up with what things looked like on the deck. So like go to the top of the tiger eye and then go to the avocado and then go stand on the top of the O. Like, so there's no number line. So what, like, for people viewing, like what Stacey's saying is standard for almost every show, especially the chorus line would be like 0, 2, 4, 6, 8. But there's no number. So a part of what makes it almost hard is that you have to be exact, but also there's space because not everyone goes to the exact position. Yeah. Like this person playing the role every night just goes like a hair downstage, and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know. like it's like exact and not exact at the same time, which is the fun of the junkyard.
So for the 2016 revival, did all of because revival means that a show is, for anyone who doesn't know, a revival means that a show is being brought back to Broadway for a second time, or maybe third or fourth time or whatever. But there already was an original production of this. This was when you brought it back to Broadway. It was a new set and a new theater, right? So is that true?
Yeah, it's kind of. It was a new theater. Similar. It was the same set design, same costume design. The choreography was different. So we had Andy Blankenbuehler, who choreographed Hamilton, came and like did sort of a revised version that was a mix of his choreography and his conceptual ideas and the original Gillian Lynn's choreography. So we had that musically. We had a whole different arrangements for songs because I had done the original version prior as well. But for the most part, the set is the same because I've done Cats a few times. Every time I've done it, this sounds so silly, the junk is slightly different. There's always like, the oven's always there, the pipes, the tire's there, but then some things might be slightly different. Like the tour set was slightly different, and it threw me for a bit. So like, that's not the layout that I'm used to. But.
Oh my gosh. I did. So I don't know how many thousands of times we did the mug dance in Beauty and the Beast, where they're all clinking the mugs. That was the most challenging dance I've ever had to learn, because if you clink in the wrong way, you somebody's elbow gets clinked. You get hurt. But also the fact that there's no, like, what you do in the mug dance does not correspond to anything you would ever learn in a dance class. There's no, it's literally just like holding like this, it's like dun 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 dun, cheers, dun dun. It is so, and there's no, it's just like movements that that they made up.
Specific to that,
specific to that show. So it's not where you can be like, oh, chasse, oh, my body knows what a chasse is. It's just like
this is its own thing.
Oh my gosh, learning that was so difficult.
Like special skills, mug movements.
Right, mug clinks.
Yes, exactly.
It's such a great number, though.
I can imagine that's hard.
It's crazy. But your whole show was like that. Like for us, we at least had, we were pretty highly choreographed for Beauty and the Beast.
It's a
very, very much
production number heavy show. It's like production number after production number.
Yes. And as an ensemble member for that, there was a lot to learn, but I wasn't doing 4 roles. But
as you
that's
know,
amazing.
Like, and for me, having a background of singing and dancing, that it's rare to come across a show where you're being the demand of both of those talents at the same time is so high and at a level that challenges you every time you do it. I've been in ensemble in other shows where I'm having so much fun, but I'm like on for 10 minutes. I go off for a half hour while the love interests have a scene and song, and that's still fun too. But there's something about Cats that like anyone who's done it is like, boy, it is like, it requires so much attention of you as an artist and committed to the feline movement, like in all seriousness, as silly as it sounds. You have to be so attentive to to it. And
she does pause in real life all the time.
I guess I did it earlier today.
Yeah. We were like saying a prayer together, and I was like, "You're doing pause."
So it's
that's awesome.
But yeah, it's really exciting in a way. Anytime I've done it, I don't really get sick of it because it's always like, can I rise to the challenge today? And vocally, the show is really hard. And I was singing soprano in it, and it's like, it's very demanding, and it's
that's so
and
hard.
People don't really realize that with the show.
Up in the rafters, it's intense.
Visually, it's so exciting and stimulating. There's something about where I said with performing on Broadway, where we're so privileged to be able to say this and have this, but it's performing on any stage anywhere feels special and feels like home, right? And some of some of the theaters you go through on tour are like absolutely incredible, have history to them, beautiful architecture, amazing historic legends that have performed there. And there's something about like the Broadway stage where it feels cool, it feels like home, like any other stage. But then you walk out and then you're like, oh, there's Times Square, and this is Midtown Manhattan, and there's my marquee, and like, that's a Broadway marquee, and that's what I used to stand in front of when I would like come visit here. Like, it's so special to know, like, oh, and then when you go into Times Square, you see the TKTS signs, and you're like, people are trying to come see the show I'm in right now. Like what? Like a tourist is coming from around the world to like see a show on Broadway, and I'm like, that is the crazy part about it that you kind of forget because you're so used to the theater as your home base, your workplace.
Well, and you're day in and day out, and it doesn't always feel like that in one sense. You know, it's like. Yeah, especially once you get into that rhythm of day in and day out of
8 shows a week,
your job, and you're rehearsing and you're performing.
Right. Yeah, that's so cool. Melissa, what did you do? What show did you do, and what were your roles?
I did Les Miserables. So I did Les Mis. I did the revival. So this was the second revival of it because there had already been one revival. So it was a 2014 revival. So we opened in 2014. We closed in 2016. We did a 2.5-year run. And
you were with the show the entire run, right?
I was with the show the entire run. So
Is that longer than a typical Broadway contract, or do they renew every year?
Yeah. They renew. So a lot, for the most part, principal cast members, usually, it can depend, but usually principals are on like a year contract. So we did have principals who left at that time, some renewed, just depending on what they were doing and what they had going on. And then the chorus contracts actually are just... Oh, well, this changed.
Yeah.
So what has been standard for many, many years was the chorus contracts are actually just an open-ended contract. Yeah. But I think you maybe renew a writer or something every 6 months. Yeah. But that has kind of since changed. Like by the time, which was only 2 years, a year and a half later, they were on like 6-month writers.
6-month writers, and then right after that, it changed to year for chorus members. So there's a distinction between principal and chorus contracts through the union. But chorus contracts shifted to being a year-long signing from first rehearsal.
Yeah, I think so.
And that was kind of something, just little business insight, was because my agents were saying like new shows are getting cast members who join for the first couple months, open the show, and then because they're so talented, are booked in another show and leave.
Oh, yeah, because a chorus member has a 4-week out, right?
Yeah, you have
so that's, yeah.
So it's kind of an incentive to keep, it's a contract writer of sorts to keep the actor in the show for a certain amount of time. That way producers don't have to try to hire someone new so quickly.
I was not that chorus member who was hopping show to show.
We stayed in our shows as long as we could. Because our job is calling.
But some of our friends out there like, bam, bam, bam.
Yeah.
Like,
I feel like Ariana Rosario did that.
Yeah.
I did. She and I did A Christmas Carol together in 2012 at the McCarter Theater in Princeton, New Jersey. That was such a special experience. Everyone in that ensemble, for the most part, like everyone except like 2 people who was in that like dance ensemble, we basically just had one dance number, which was the Fezziwig dance party for A Christmas Carol.
Yes.
And we just had like moments on stage, and then we would go backstage, and then we'd be like a chorus person, just like a townsperson here and there. Right. But she was a member of that dance ensemble. Everybody in that show went on to do like Broadway stuff or national tours, like immediately afterwards. Like Mike Feist was in Newsies on Broadway, and then he was in the original cast of Dear Evan Hansen, got a Tony nomination, and then Ariana has done like a bajillion things ever since.
She was my dressing roommate. Like we were right next to each other. Yeah. She's such a talented, lovely gal. Yeah.
Super talented. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. We used to have dance classes together, and she would like teach me hip hop because I knew nothing about it. She's so good at it. Yeah. So Melissa, who did you play in Les Mis?
Yeah, so I was in the ensemble, and I understudied from the beginning of the contract. I understudied Cosette. And then the last year of our contract, I also understudied Fantine, which was really awesome. Because really, when I started the show, I wouldn't have ever imagined like also getting to cover Fantine. At some point in the audition process, I had done Eponine stuff, so I was like, oh, maybe I'll get to understudy Eponine at one point. And there are other people in the cast who kind of filled that role better. And then so it was fun that kind of the last year I was like, oh, I'm mom too. Like I'm daughter and mom. This is
I know. What a cool thing.
Yeah, super cool actually. And so that was really special. So was in the ensemble every night as well. And then for the tour, which went out a year after.
It's just funny to me. We both did the Broadway revivals and then eventually went out on the tours. It's cool.
Of the 80s phenomenon shows.
Yeah. Go ahead.
And you were roommates and your sisters. Yeah. Power family.
No.
And your sister was Miss Runner-Up USA, Teen USA, right?
Yeah, she was first runner-up for Miss Teen USA.
Yeah, she was Miss Teen California, right?
Yeah,
and then she went on and she like almost won. She was like number 2.
Yeah, she literally was like holding hands with the winner. Yeah.
So amazing.
Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, it's okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
No. It's all
on the tour. You played.
So on the tour, I got to play Fantine, which was really awesome. So it was really special to have that experience. The ensemble of Les Mis works really hard. I'm kind of like similar to Cats, but different. We're not dancing. Not dancing, but singing and just changing costumes. You're like on stage.
Yeah.
You're,
you never change costumes
doing... Yeah, that's different, but you're doing plenty of
different things. Yeah.
Anyway, different type of difficult, but anyway, so in the Broadway theater, we changed underneath the stage because our dressing rooms were 4 flights of stairs up.
Oh my gosh.
So we got ready for the show upstairs, and that's where we went at first, but there's not time or energy to go up all those stairs and come back down and get on stage in your new costume for the next scene. So we had what was called Wardrobe Village underneath the stage. In like the basement of the, the old
tenement houses.
Yeah. It's like dusty down there. Super dusty.
It's so funny.
Yeah. And so it's like, you're like on stage singing, you run downstairs, changing your clothes, you're back up on stage, dirt on your face, blah, blah. So it was really special. I mean, Fantine's track is really cool because you're like off, you're kind of like out of the gate running, you do your dream to dream. You live, you die, and then you chill backstage. You
backstage. You just bam.
Then you like have time backstage. And then the way Les Mis is designed, every principal except for Valjean and Javert play ensemble at one point or another in the show. So as Fantine, I got to be on the barricade in the ensemble.
Oh, cool.
Which is so fun to be on the barricade. Wow. And then you come back as a guest.
I think what's really cool about that is that, like, I know our friends who are principals, sometimes they feel like they don't really connect with the rest of the cast because they're usually pretty separated, like in their dressing room, only on stage when they're like being their principal role. So like to get to still have that camaraderie with the ensemble, I think is nice.
Oh yeah, it's super fun. It is
fun because then the whole cast feels like they're all together.
Yeah, you just get to like
there's an ensemble like community. There's an ensemble like family thing, which I imagine for Cats it's everybody because everybody is kind of a principal and an ensemble member.
It's true. It's a tribe.
Yeah.
That's
a tribe.
Yeah. And I still like especially the second year I toured the show, which is like it was 9 years ago now, which is crazy. I'm still extremely close. We actually have a weekly Zoom, which will be later this afternoon, that we started setting up in quarantine. But we have like what are called like kiddie nights, where we like get together and have game night or whatever in New York usually. So it's definitely.
Do you still do the pause?
Yeah.
I mean, like two of the people on that cast got married, and it's like it's just like super cool that
that's awesome.
The tribes that you create like in your shows. like the communities you create, or even the swing family, I will say too, is something that's really special. Like someone who has been a swing before, you're like, oh, you get it. Like, we can rely on each other in this.
Yeah. You know, one thing that I love about the New York theater community is that I've been in different theater communities in cities that have smaller theater, and everybody knows everybody in those places. And I actually really appreciated the largeness of it's a small and large community, because once you get to a certain level, everybody knows everybody. But what I really appreciated was that you found, like, the people who were the most successful tended to be really humble and really authentic and really approachable, like really friendly to, because I was in some shows with some big Broadway stars where I was an ensemble member, and those shows were where the people who were the most successful were the least likely to be the ones who looked at this like status or ranking or treating you differently according to what roles you had played. And I appreciated that so much, because actually it can be really hard for those listening who are like maybe studying musical theater or who are in a smaller theater community in a different city. Sometimes it can be a downside that with a community that's that small,
like a small bubble, kind of
small bubble. Like I feel like in college, it was like, you know, you had like 2 opportunities, maybe 3 throughout the year to get cast in a show. And that's kind of like how everybody in the department was going for like 2 or 3 female roles. If it was a male heavy show. And it's like,
I know, because a lot of them are.
Yeah. And I feel like when you gain that perspective, you go through that process of like really working hard and really not getting cast in a lot of shows, but going to tons and tons of auditions where you don't get cast. And then I think the people who really make it, who are really in it, are into that more theater community mindset where they recognize, like, if you're not a nice person, like, you're not going to get cast, because directors don't want to work with you. It has so much to do about who you are as a person, not just your status and your ranking and how high you can riff and how high you can belts and all of that kind of stuff. Those are important too, obviously, but it is, And, you know, I can't make that blanket statement, but I was just really impressed to find out that the people who were the most successful were often the most humble as well.
Yeah.
Which is great.
Actually, that leads me to want to just like mention my relationship with the fellow Cosette cover, because on Broadway Les Mis, there's at least 2 understudies for every principal role. And as you can imagine, at times that can lead to like a sort of tension or something, like, oh, who are they going to put on? Like, oh, so when, you know, the person is going to have a vacation, who are they going to put, whatever, all those. But so it was really special, because actually in the rehearsal process, there was a need for me and the other Cosette cover to cover at certain points. Like, it was like she had a costume fitting. And so we're like doing all the Cosette stuff. And so at first, like, they're like going through Heart Full of Love, and the whole cast just starts singing it because there's like no Cosette there. And then like my friend Betsy's like, guys, we have 2 beautiful covers here. Let them sing it. They know it. So like I started singing it, and I was like, oh, okay, you know, I'm like just standing on stage because we hadn't learned the blocking yet. So I'm just standing in the wing, like singing. And then the next little part comes up that Cosette sings. And I point across the stage to my friend Heidi, who is the other cover. I'm like, take this one. You go for it. She was like, oh, okay, I'll take it. So she sang, oh, no, it was In My Life. I sang In My Life. Then she sang Heart Full of Love. Then like we just, through the end of the act, switched off. Then Cosette had like another little part that I sang. Then she sang the part in One Day More. And it was so sweet, because she like came up to me afterwards. She was like, thank you so much for doing that. Like, I'm so glad we like got to both kind of do that. It's like, yeah, like we're both covering this role. And it kind of just started this like immediate friendship and bond between the 2 of us. And we started that night, I think we texted each other and we said like hashtag Team Cosette. And so that hashtag continued. We were both there the whole run, sat next to each other in the dressing room. And it was a spirit of like camaraderie and support. Like when we found out like, oh, hey, are you on today? Like, yes, I'm on. I'm like, okay. She would be like, what do you need? I'm going to go get you some Lay's potato chips, because we'd eat those to keep our like vocal cords greasy, and like it's a good excuse to eat potato chips. But I'd be like, okay, what do you need? Let me get you tea. Let me get you whatever our favorite thing from the juice place nearby. But it's just like so special to have that relationship. And it's like, why not create that and be supportive of the other person? Because you both worked hard to like, to understudy this role together.
It's the virtue of magnanimity, being magnanimous, because you have been cast, and so you don't need to prove yourself anymore.
Exactly.
It's really hard, like in I feel like in a college show when you maybe have like 4 or 5 performances and there's maybe 2 understudies and they both want to be there because they both want to put that on their resume. But if someone actually does have to call out, both understudies aren't going to go on. It's going to be one. I mean, unless they have a 2-show day and they kind of, do you ever call them two doshés?
Yeah. I don't know why they do that. I don't know, but yeah. I don't know.
It sounds like a ballet term. It's like demi tout doshé, grand tout doshé. Yeah. And so when we were having a hard day on tour, we would talk about it being like a grand tout doshé. Yeah. And it was like, today was like feeling easy. It's like, no, it's a demi.
Yeah, I love it. I'll say too, as far as camaraderie, like even what I've been realizing in this quarantine time, because like you said, like we're very used to not actually doing what we love on a daily basis, in the sense that we're used to having a side hustle, being a waitress in the after, like at night, trying to make 2 auditions in the morning if I can, probably not booking those, going back to work, like not necessarily doing the performing job 8 times a week. We know that is what we sign up for, in a sense, and it can be really difficult and emotionally draining. But I was thinking, because like in this time, I'm like, I'm used to uncertainty, totally. But what's different is, one, we don't even have the option of like any performing jobs really happening. Right. But I was realizing how much the audition room, the holding room in particular, can actually be a way that I see people I really enjoy and like get to like catch up with someone. So for me, I'll say, especially for ladies who go to like singing calls or dancing calls, chorus calls, whatever, those rooms are always so packed. There's so many of us there, but that's where I see like my friends, and especially
you hold each other's place in line. And you go get each other coffee and like you take care of each other. Absolutely.
Or even like invited calls that you get to go. It's just like cool to know that you can like some of my friends who I haven't actually done a show with in 8 or 9 years, but I see them on auditions all the time. That's so nice. I really.
It is. And it's like, look, an opportunity to sit here and have coffee with my friend while we wait. And it totally is. That was one of my favorite things. Cause like in Los Angeles, I imagine it's super, super, super hard for actors because, it's hard for actors in LA and New York, but I was so grateful in New York. I got the chance to audition. Like I got the chance to get seen in front of people. And I think for LA, you have to submit electronically. I wonder if that's where it's going in New York too, once the theaters open back up again. But in LA, you do have to submit electronically. And I would talk to my friends who are out there trying to be film actors. And they're like, you just send your resume from a coffee shop. You send your resume out 1,000 times a day. And maybe if you don't have an agent, maybe once every couple of months, you get an audition or something. You actually get to go. And then when you go, it's not this community experience. It's so interesting, actually. I'll just share, because I think most people who listen to my show regularly probably have heard me refer to the shows that I've done, but just in case we have some new listeners. So I did, I was non-union. I was EMC, which means equity membership candidate, but I was not a part of the actors union, which is called Equity. So that made it possible for me to perhaps work a little bit more, because there are more non-equity shows, but they also don't pay as well. It's like a double-edged sword, you know. But I did 2 national tours. The first one was the Wizard of Oz national tour, and you spoke of wearing a lot of hats and a lot of costume changes, Melissa. That was my experience for that one. I understudied that was my second one. I understudied Glinda. So I understudied Glinda, so I got to fly in on the bubble. It was really special. Got to go on twice for her, which was so cool. And then I only went on twice in 6 months, which is kind of spoke well of the other, of the role. And then I wore 7 different hats. So we did, because we were on tour and we didn't have like a wardrobe city underneath the stage. We did have to do the 5 flights of stairs quite frequently. So at the Fox Theater in St. Louis, which is a 5,000 seat house, we had to go up 5 flights of stairs.
Neither of us have played it, but we've heard so much about it.
That was like my favorite. It was going to be the week of Easter, I think.
It was my favorite theater.
I know, people talk about it. It's such an amazing place.
They're going to rebook it. It's going to happen.
I'll just go see a show there sometime. Let's go to St. Louis and see a show there.
Also, my gosh. Oh, it's so beautiful there. And when you go backstage, there's like, Michael Jackson's signature on the the wall.
So
Judy
cool.
Garland, you know, just like
so cool.
these legends, Tony Bennett, like people have signed the walls. And then, actually it was really nice because Dorothy let us use her star dressing room, to make some of our chorus changes.
That's awesome.
She was so nice because we were like, our legs were dying because we were doing two douches for the weekend that we were there up and down the stairs. So I was a flying monkey. I was a citizen of Oz. I was a poppy.
I was just going to say poppy. Yeah,
there was a beautiful dance number where we were poppies and then we turned into snow. And I was the mayoress of Munchkinland.
Oh,
so fun. It's a character that's not in the movie, but they made it up for the show.
I
so
love that.
Took all
there should definitely be a mayoress. I think that's perfect.
Absolutely. I wore the pants in the relationship.
Yeah.
Like I was really the mayor. And then my second tour was Beauty and the Beast. So I played,
one of my favorite shows.
It is such a beautiful show. Oh, I loved it. I understudied Mrs. Potts in the wardrobe for that one, which was really cool. Yeah. And then I played a fork and a plate and a napkin and the baker's wife. So the part where he says, Marie, the baguettes, hurry up. That was me. Yeah. Everybody remembers that for some reason. Yeah. It's really funny.
The whole opening number is fantastic.
Carrying those baguettes is a good way to make a living. So
that's amazing. I love it.
Yeah, so we did 43 states, 70 cities for each tour. Wow. And it was crazy. I mean, you guys appreciate this. I'm guessing because you were equity tours, you probably had longer sit downs.
Well, she's done non-ec tour.
I've done non-ec and equity.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I've done the one-nighters. It's so weird. I'm getting, because at this point now, my Facebook memories are showing me like 10 years ago when I used to post like more details of my life than I do now. But it was like, just got through this week of one-nighters, like, and that's where I was 10 years ago. Like, so I know that.
One-nighters are a city every night. Yeah. I'm translating for people who don't speak.
Yes.
We had, for the Wizard of Oz, 17 one-nighters in a row with no days off. And some of them were 2 show days. It was crazy. March, and it was like, it was like in Canada. Yeah, it was like in Canada in the middle of winter. So it was
so cold. Oh no.
I look back now and I'm like, they paid me $325 a week.
Yeah,
for this life.
Such hard work.
It is such hard work. But motherhood is harder.
That's fair. That's 24/7. Like you never stop.
Exactly. But motherhood is harder, but also more edifying now at this point in my life.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. So what was your experience? I want to make sure we get into kind of the living your faith in the arts, because there's a ton of people who have reached out to me and been like, I want to move to New York City, but I don't know how to keep my faith. There's a lot of people I think who are they're like, they want to give up on the arts. And they want to be like, just it's a sordid world. Just don't even go there. Like you'll lose your soul. And that wasn't my experience in New York City. Although I understand why people sometimes say that about it, but it's not people who are actually there doing it. It's like people from the outside looking in. So what, as like an insider, having lived that life, was it hard to be Catholic in New York City as an actress? And how did you navigate that?
I'm just going to touch on something real quick about New York. Okay. So what I was pretty really positively overwhelmed by is when you go to New York and start maybe going to some of the young adult Catholic events, is that most young adult people who are living in New York, moved there for a reason, moved there either to pursue something or are trying something, got a new job, something like that, or there for school maybe. And it's like you're automatically looking for community. There's something about you that's searching. Maybe your family's not there. I think other than one person I can think of who is from there, almost everyone I know from my Catholic New York circle is not from there, was looking for community. So when you start to go to some things, it's hard sometimes when you're performing or whatever, your schedule doesn't accommodate that. But even a daily mass here and there, you'll find community, and they do a really good job of sending out emails and blasts of different things that are happening. So
I will link to that in the show notes. For anyone who wants to go to New York. Yeah, Catholic NYC. It's amazing. It's run by a gentleman, our mutual friend, Colin Akaza, and he has done an incredible job. I mean, you can go to something every night of the week and meet 30 new Catholics, and you're going to resonate with somebody at every single event. It's just, it's insane. It's unlike any other young adult community.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. And I think, like you're saying, because there's this desire and need for community in New York City. And people feel that whether they're Christians, Catholics or not. But I have found some of the most like devout and passionate Catholic people and Christian people in New York City. Because when you find those people, you're like, yes, like I need you. And that family becomes very strong.
Sometimes the title of being a Catholic artist, I think people sometimes think you have to be one or the other, or as like Melissa said, like sacrifice part of those identities. Like you can't be both at the same time. And I think what I would want people to understand, and I've been so blessed to see this, is there's actually like a Venn diagram of people who are both of those truly and 100% on both of them. And actually just like a cool story is like there was a gal that had messaged me on Instagram like 2 years ago, was going in for the Cats National Tour and like knew that I was a part of the show at one point. So she was like, hey, do you have like any advice for this audition? Like she had just gone to an open call and she was also Catholic. And so she had just moved to the city and was asking me about resources and all this stuff. So I had messaged her back. And we kind of messaged back and forth, and then cut to like a year later. I'm on the Cats National Tour, and then we needed a new replacement, and she comes in and books it. And I'm like,
wow.
Wait, is this that girl that, and what's weird too is that like some kind of Catholic event in New York, someone was like, oh, you should meet this gal Loretta. And I was like, I feel like we've messaged and we had, and now like we got to tour the country together on a show that we had both kind of discussed in messaging, and we went to mass together, like, which was so cool.
So good.
And I'll tell people, like, and ever since, I think it was probably about 9 or 10 years ago where I started realizing you can actively pray to have a fellow person of faith, whether Christian, non-denominational, or Catholic, or whatever, have a person of faith in the show with you. You can always ask for that. Like, the Lord's never, you know, like, that's something to pray for with intention.
It's really good.
And I've been blessed for the most part to either have someone who actively practices some form of Christianity, or understands it, or I don't know, some kind of connecting point. But all that to say, like, the Catholic artist thing is something more recently in moving to New York where I realized, like, oh, there's a really cool way to identify as this thing and find other people who do too. And not like weird, because you're usually the weird Catholic one in your artist circle, or you're the weird artist in your Catholic circle.
In your Catholic circle.
You know what I mean? So it's cool to find that.
Part of my story, my discernment story with my husband, is that he led a letter to artists discussion group. And this is when we were friends and getting to know each other. And
the letter to artists is written by John Paul II, right?
Yes. Exactly. And that was so cool. He was the young adult ministry leader at St. Malachy's at the time and wanted to do this. And the people that we met through, that was so cool, because we would just come, we would discuss like a portion of the letter, and we're meeting all these artists, like, you know,
organists,
architect, graphic designers, musical theater,
poet, like
pianist, all that. My husband's an audio engineer, a musician, just everyone. And we would just talk for hours, because it was like, oh my gosh, the other people who are Catholic artists, this is so cool. And that's really important. So that was just really,
and that church so specifically, even when Melissa had told me about it when I moved there, it's called St. Malachy's, the Actors Chapel. And it's a church that has mass times after performances. They have an actor's shrine inside, has icons of patron saints of performers, like Saint Genesius. Saint Cecilia. So I think sometimes, I don't know, like, I think it's funny that there's this potential mindset, like, in Christianity that's like, artistry is so, like, worldly, because in a sense it's fundamentally human and beautiful and like divine. Like the churches we walk into, the churches we walk into were created by artists. And sometimes, like, as a culture, I think I will say is like American culture, I think sometimes doesn't realize how much artistry has affected your day-to-day life. Absolutely. Visual art, musical art, performing art, like, it's around us all the time, but maybe people don't realize that.
And it doesn't have to just look like icons and classical churches either. I think that's another thing that because you definitely encounter that resistance in some Catholic circles where they're like, do you wear leotards in ballet class? Like, that's evil, you know? And there is sometimes that mentality out there. And I'm like, no, I think actually that, you know, we see, Catholic, some of the greatest Catholic art features, nude bodies. Like there's the beauty of the body and the human, and a human expression. And it's a real thing that is actually a time-honored tradition in our church. It's not just like this separate thing. It's actually an integration of body and soul, and it's using your body for the glory of God. And there's lots of ways that doesn't happen in theater, and that's very true. Like there were things that I looked at and I was like, I'm just not going to audition for this. Like you have to use your discernment. And it's like, I'm not going to go in for this show. And sometimes it was hard because people would invite you to audition for something that you really, like a role that would have looked good on your resume, and it would have given you the opportunity to be a working actor rather than a non-working actor, which 90% of actors are non-working in New York. And so it would have given you that, and potentially you would have met someone who would have led this thing. But I think it's really important to ask yourself, like, what are my first principles? Like, what are my first things that I'm doing? And I didn't always do this perfectly, myself, but I think as my journey went on and I started to realize, like, I have to put God first, and I really have to surrender this this career to Him. Then you get a sense of peace about turning down opportunities, rather than just being grateful for any show or any opportunity and just going in for anything. You think, okay, I will, like, if God wants me to have this career, He's going to make it happen in a way where I'm going to also have a clean conscience, and I'm actually going to really be able to glorify Him, as opposed to, I'm going to be a part of shows that have such beautiful underlying themes and such, like, we've been blessed, the three of us, to be a part of these shows that really do reflect the beauty of God's creation and the power of His love. And that's one of my favorite things.
I don't think that's like a coincidence either. Like, I was thinking about it, I was like, oh yeah, our shows, like, there's, like, because God knows us and knows those desires and has given us these opportunities to be in shows that really, are just beautiful and reflect these timeless messages of humanity and principles that are very good, true, and beautiful. And that's a huge blessing.
Yeah. I want to make sure before we go to that, I just get your thoughts on interacting with, working with people who are living a different lifestyle. I have a little one who just woke up from a nap just now. So hi. So this is how we roll here. But I do want to get your thoughts, because this is sort of, clear. Okay, can you hear me again? Yeah. This is my little man here. Hi. The arts is often at the forefront of pushing the boundaries of, which is part of the artistic tendency, maybe, is to push the boundaries and to ask, what is possible, which is a good thing. But then sometimes as well in our culture where we're kind of tending farther and farther away from God, how did you deal with just like being in a culture where maybe certain things were expected, or certain things were accepted that just we can't agree to as Catholics? How did you kind of navigate that?
Yeah, sure. I'll say first specifically, I remember on my first year of tour, I realized I needed to set some stuff for myself. And what I mean by that is I realized I needed to be in my Bible more. So I, on the summer off in between the 2 years of tour I did a while ago, I went through the book of Psalms and created literally a list that said scripture verses for tour. And those would be the verses that I would go to if I was feeling overwhelmed, either with drama, like things that aren't even like moral complications, but just like, I'm overwhelmed. Okay, where can I go in scripture to feel supported and encouraged? Then also, so it's been things over time where even like when I'm doing shows during Lent and I'm figuring out what practices I want to incorporate into my daily life, regardless of the show I'm doing, coming into more of practice of praying a rosary daily, asking for grace more as we encounter things in our workplace. And so like even on the tour I was just on, I realized it was kind of hard to keep my practice of praying a rosary daily because it was just like hours were a bit more in flux. Whatever the call time was different in a different city. But I would just like pull myself away from the dressing room for a bit, find a quiet nook in the theater before half hour, and just go take my rosary there and pray it there. Now, I wasn't always successful at that. I didn't always do that, but I have a specific memory of a city where I'm like, I just need to pull away a little bit and remind myself that I shouldn't be, I can't expect myself to be able to like always be peaceful if I don't actually go and seek that spiritually for myself and carve that out.
Yeah.
So, and one of the things I was really, really enjoying about tour, because I was having a really great time, honestly, was not only seeing the different cities, but going into different churches and different communities and seeing, like, it was just very interesting. Like, some cities were like, oh my, like Houston, thriving young adult family community at the parish at like the 10 a.m. mass before I went, no. Whoa, that was not Houston. It was Washington, D.C. But then I remember, and this is really interesting, going to Boston, and it was a very, very small church in the middle of the city. And knowing the scandals that have hit Boston in the church, and they had like a blurb about it at the end, and like in the bulletin of how this community has been hurt by scandals in the church and how to pray for the community. And knowing that like that our church has wounds on it, and like how can we as people who still love the Eucharist want to pray for the church and for the wounds that it has hurt people, that it has caused people. Anyway, that's like a tangent. But so one is being intentional about your own prayer life, regardless of where you are, as protection too. Like you have to be guarded and remember that we're all human, and you know, we can all be tempted in different ways. The other thing is too, is like what I've noticed is like the people that I work with, like for the most part, are like family. Like I really love them, and they might not understand my lifestyle, and I might not understand theirs, but I really love them like as human beings, and and we can really just like, I don't know, respect each other. And I find for the most part, like we've encountered people who either were Catholic at some point, left the faith, don't quite understand it, know the prayers but don't get them. And like I had one woman on the tour I was just on who like doesn't really practice, but she's like, can I go to mass with you? It's like, yeah, you can go to mass with me. Like, that'd be awesome. And we went, we talked about it, and that was it. She didn't come again, but it was like, it's not about, I'm not trying to necessarily like make everyone like come to mass with me, but it's like, hopefully we can live out the example in our day-to-day life and just have conversations with people about, I know Bishop Robert Barron has put out the statistic that 7% of current young adult Catholics that were raised Catholic still go to church. So we're like in a very, very small percentile. But ultimately, I don't always feel like that, because I feel like I see people who are practicing this faith, who believe it, who
small and mighty.
Small and mighty. Small and mighty. And a lot of times people just need to encounter someone who loves Jesus and also isn't like their idea of weird. You know what I mean? Like sometimes to just be the face of like a functional person who also goes to church, because sometimes it is that rare in some people's lives, that witness.
And that's what I was going to say is I actually can't think of any specific experiences where I've encountered kind of a direct, like negative response to my faith or anything. And I think a big part of that is, like Madison said, really, as much as we can, and asking for the grace for this, to live out our faith as authentically as possible, and to encounter all of the people that we work with and come across with seeing them and the dignity of the whole person that they are, and growing to love them where they are. And I have had a lot of experiences, like just, it's funny, you like show up to the theater and people are like, oh, how was mass this morning? Like, because people knew that I went to church every Sunday, and I was like, it was great, thanks for asking. And but that came over some time of getting to know people and understanding. I did come to find this deep respect, even with people who lived very different lives than me. And some of my best friends have different views than me in big ways, but there's a respect there and a dialogue there. And conversations have been brought up in a very like respectful way that I couldn't have really imagined. And so there's a beauty in that. And the thing is, yeah, I understand the idea of like, okay, like how can I do this? But if God is calling to you to it, he will give you like the grace and the strength. And that can be a constant discernment. There are times that you're in a dressing room and you're like, this is not really a conversation that I want to be a part of or want to be listening to. So I'm just going to excuse myself for a minute. And there may be times where you discern, you kind of have to say a little something here or there. People generally tended to kind of understand, I don't know, like where I stood on things there. Oh, sorry, Melissa, you know, and thanks guys. Yeah. But overall, it's, like you said, just that witness is really important. And like Madison touched on too, like I do know a lot of people who left the church for one reason or another, but actually like a lot of people in my cast were like, oh yeah, I was raised Catholic or whatever. And so you're like, oh, okay. And that's something to kind of take into account and understand, that we may or may not understand where those, where wounds came from, or if it was just a decision to leave the church for one reason or another, and to be mindful of that. And hopefully, by the grace of God, be presenting to these people the love of God that they've deserved from day one, and that they may not have found anywhere else, and that they need to find. Yes. And that's what we can do, and pray and, pray and pray for God to kind of open up these true, authentic relationships with people who are different than us, because that's how we start to actually come to understand each other better and hopefully just, I don't know, affect each other.
Yeah, definitely.
I'll say like people who are artists tend to be, it's like you're interested in the human experience, you're interested in empathy. You are, or you almost have an inclination, maybe that's too righteous to say. No, you have like an inclination toward empathy and understanding someone else. Yeah. And so I'll feel like other people are kind of just like interested, because they're like, wait, you do go to mass regularly.
Yeah, sometimes you're like, what?
And so it's actually just a really nice,
you said you had someone be like, oh,
you're a Catholic.
Oh, you're a Catholic. And she's like,
I was like, yeah, what that means to you, but sure. Because I was like going, I think my birthday was coming up on tour, and I was like, I think I'm going to go to a daily mass before rehearsal. And he's like, oh, so you're like Catholic.
So you're like, not just like confirmed and done, but like
whatever that means to you. Yeah.
You actually do the things. Yeah.
I do. It's really, really not, I don't know. It's really nice. I feel like, and I think if you're the type of person that wants to look and see the positive, the graces around you, you'll see it. It is our human tendency to find negative and to scour that and to hold on to that. But really, when I think about there's drama. Sometimes you're like, oh, the petty things that we fall into, that that we make big deals out of little things in the workplace, whatever. But for the most part, when I reflect on it, like as you ask it, I realize there are just so many wonderful conversations that have come about with people who aren't church going, but want to talk to me. Or even if we're not even talking about anything regarding church, but hopefully we have the light of Christ in conversation with them. And honestly, people who, you know, and St. Paul, like, will remind us of this, like, fruits of the Spirit are something to look for. And I feel there are people that might not be going to Mass, but I see the fruits of the Spirit in how they live. And it's nice to encounter that with other people.
And I think people see that in you. And I've had that, I think we've had that experience too, when you're like, oh, people kind of see, like, there's a piece about this person. Like, what is that? I kind of want to understand that better. And we know that that's Christ. But that's something that people can see and like, oh, they have hope, they have peace.
Yes,
I want that. Like, what's going on there?
Absolutely.
It's funny because I was thinking what I think of sometimes with my friends. I hope they see, like, I don't have it all together. Just because I'm it's actually more indicative that I don't have it all together, that I'm like praying more often. You know what I mean?
This is why I need to pray.
So hopefully, because I know sometimes people have this perception of like, well, then if I'm praying, then I'm holier than that. And I'm like, no. I just like really need to like center it, because I'm like all over the place. So I think that can be kind of funny.
That's so
peaceful,
cool.
Hopefully peaceful too.
Yeah.
And I'll say like, and I've had people that like ask, like something crazy happened, someone's health got really bad in a show one time, and someone's like, hey, can you pray for us? Can you pray for this person? And like, and it's,
actually I have had those experiences when something really,
as you're called in that moment.
Yeah, like, kind of tragic or deeply, difficult goes on in a cast, then people kind of tend to like, seek out people who have that kind of groundedness. And
it's interesting. I agree. Yeah. I wish I did not have to let you go. Unfortunately, the sun is setting here in Virginia, so I need light. And my daughter is waking up from her nap, so I have to go to get her. But
Mommy,
do you want to say hi to the ladies?
Hi. I have like one more thought that I can really summarize. Is that okay if I say it? Because I just
go for it.
I know we've talked a lot about being on Broadway. Like we've all had these amazing careers of doing national tours and being on Broadway. And I just want to say to everyone who's pursuing theater, being on Broadway is not the most fulfilling creative experience. Like I have had the most fun in shows that are not on Broadway, that are not paid. I just want people to know that, because it's a blessing that we've had these experiences, but I want to make sure people who are passionate about theater understand that if God does or doesn't have that plan for you, like God is going to give you beautifully creative, fulfilling experiences. And I can't wait to do a show at some point in the future, that I'm like not paid a lot for, but just because I want to do it and I'm excited to be there. And it's a 6-week run. And I just want to make sure people understand that, because I think it's important to understand that. And
there's
definitely, I gotta pay my bills.
Well, your full career is that right now.
I understand exactly what you're saying, but I also understand people who are like, but for real, I gotta make money. But yes, like there's no art, and we know plenty of extremely talented people who have not booked either Broadway or haven't even booked like the thing that they were so perfect for, that they were really close to.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like, it's just not indicative all the time of like success or whatever.
No, it's not. Because everybody who's in New York is talented.
Yeah.
Everybody, like, for the most part, has a base level of talent, which tends to be very high. And it just happens to be that not only are you the right height and you're the right voice type and you're the right weight and you have the right facial features and you can sing the right notes, but also that you happen to wear a pair of shoes that they liked. And so they remembered you at your audition. And so that's why you got your call back, because there's a million other people who are also right for that role. And it really does have so much to do with, so I think learning to take it less personally is super important. And to recognize that, like, a creative life can mean so many different things.
And that's like what we always have to remember, like our worth. If we put our worth on this business, it's going to be like that.
Well, which is happening.
And our worth is in the Lord 100%. We are always having to remind ourselves that every day, no matter what journey we're walking.
In any career.
As actors, we really need to always remember that. Yes. So,
amen.
Praise God.
Thank you, ladies. You guys are amazing. Thank you for so much of your time.